Slowly but surely, we have hit part 3. Where is when? And for this chapter, Bug, there's a young child put in danger. There's insect creepiness. And a not exactly an in-depth description of animal death, but still, it's there. So, and I know it bothers me a lot of the time, so if you don't want to watch this video, I really don't blame you. With that being said, without further ado, let's begin part 3. Where is when? The day is words and rage. The day is order, earth and gold. It is the philosophers in their cities. It is the map makers in their wastelands. It is roads and milestones. It is panic, laughter and sobriety, white and all enumerated things. It is flesh. It is revenge. It is visibility. The night is blue and black. The night is silence, poetry, and love. It is the dancers in their grove of bones. It is transforming all things. It is fate. It is freedom. It is masks and silver and ambiguity. It is blood. It is forgiveness. It is the music, is the invisible music of instinct. Flash Demorando, the division of the hours. Chapter 15, Bug. Maybe it was the warmth of the fire. Maybe it was the strange scent of the dress she'd been given. Maybe it was simply the fact that she was exhausted. Whatever the reason, Candy slipped into a pleasant doze in front of Izareth's fire, while little Mesa played sing-song games beside her. It wasn't a deep enough sleep to bring dreams, just a few flickering memories of the sights she'd seen in the last few hours. The lighthouse in all its ragged glory, standing in the long grass, neglected, but waiting. The turquoise ball, etched with the very same design she'd drawn in her workbook. The sea of Isabella rolling out of nowhere like a foaming miracle. She opened her eyes suddenly, her heart jumping. Mesa had suddenly stopped her singing and had gone from the spot on the ragged rug beside her. She had retreated to the corner of the room, close to her brother's cot, her eyes fearful. Behind her, Candy heard a whirring sound. Something told her to move very cautiously, which she did, turning her head oh so slowly to discover what was making such a peculiar noise. Hovering in the middle of the room was a creature that looked to Candy like a cross between a very large locust and a dragonfly. Its wings were bright green, and it had uncannily large eyes, beneath which lay a design on its head that looked at first glance like a smile. She glanced back at Mesa. Plainly the poor child didn't know what to make of this thing any more than Candy. She was gripping hold of the edge of the cot, as though she was ready to climb in and hide with her brother if the creature made a move towards her. Candy didn't have any time for bugs, big or small. Back in Chicken Town they often had plagues of flies, because of the factories, and there was nothing she hated more than to go into the kitchen and find a host of big blue insects crawling on the dishes her mother had left caked with food in the sink before she went to work. Candy had no sentimentality about flies. She'd take a cloth and whip at them, catching them in mid-flight and killing them when they hit the ground. She knew where they'd been, in the coops, eating chicken excrement, or feeding on the caked blood that stank in the gutters around the slaughterhouse. They were flying diseases as far as she was concerned. The only good fly was a dead fly. The same with roaches, which periodically invaded the Quackenbush house on Followell Street. Again, no mercy. But this was a bug of a different order, and Candy wasn't sure how to treat it. For one thing, it was so big, more like a bird than an insect. She wasn't afraid of it stinging or biting her. She was quite ready to risk that. But she was afraid of enraging it and then having it turn on the children. She decided rather than swatting it like a very large wasp, she'd treat it as if it were a bird and tried to coax it out through the door. Mesa, I want Mama. She's coming back soon. I want you to sit very still, yes? Yes. Having instructed the child, Candy tried to position herself so that she could shoo the insect through the door. But wherever she moved around the room, the creature repositioned itself so that it was always staring directly at her, like an eager photographer determined to get a shot of her. When she approached it, the thing made no sign of retreating, but instead extended its neck so that its bug eyes seemed to get even bigger. All this maneuvering gave Candy plenty of time to study the thing and appreciate its intricacies. She should not have been surprised that a world which contained such a strange species as sea skippers should have insects as bizarre as this. But the more she looked at it, the more unusual it seemed. Its eyes had an unnerving depth to them, as if behind the layer of blue-green sheen was something more than insectoid intelligence. In fact, there was something almost too intelligent about the way it looked at her. Weren't bugs supposed to be stupid? Why then did this thing study her as if it had a mind of its own? She tried everything to usher the creature out of the door, but it wouldn't go, so she decided to try a plan too. When a bird got into the house, a rare event, but one that made Candy's mother become panicky, it always fell to Candy to get it out. She applied the same method now. She went to the narrow pallet against the far wall, where apparently Izareth, her husband, and Mesa slept, and picked up a sheet. When she turned around, she found the creature had followed her across the room. Before it had time to work out what she was doing, she snatched up the sheet, threw it over the creature, and pulled it to the ground. The dragonfly instantly began to flap wildly and give off what sounded remarkably like a baby sobbing, rising scales of complaint which the sheet did very little to muffle. Candy held on tight, attempting to capture the creature without hurting it. She gathered up the sheet beneath the insect and gently transported it to the door. But she had not counted on the violence of the creature's motion. It flapped so wildly, and its wings were so strong, that it began to tear the thin fabric open as if it were no more than a paper bag. Candy hastened her trip to the door, but the creature was too quick for her. It tore out of the sheet and rose into the air again, hovering and turning on the spot 7 or 8 times. Plainly it wanted to ascertain who'd played this trick on it. When it fixed upon its captor, it defiantly flew closer than ever, and Candy saw the darkness behind its eyes close up, like a mechanical iris. "You're not real," she said to it, amazed and annoyed at the same time. Amazed because she'd been fooled by its perfection for so long, and annoyed for exactly the same reason. The thing was spying on her. "Damn thing," she said, whipping the sheet around as she would have done in the kitchen at Followell Street if she'd been in pursuit of a blue bottle. The creature was so big, and perhaps a little dizzied by its own maneuvers, that she quickly caught it in the sheet and brought it down. It struck the ground very hard. As soon as it hit the floorboards, she knew that her guess was about its true nature was correct. The sound it made was undeniably metallic. She pulled off the sheet. The thing was laying on its side, one of its wings flapping weakly, the other entirely still, and its 6 legs pedaled slowly as though someone had just snatched a bicycle from between them. But even now, wounded and dizzied, it turned its bug eyes toward Candy, and she heard a humming sound that the noise of its wings had hitherto disguised. It was the noise of the creature's mechanism she could hear, and it was clearly badly damaged. Even so, Candy didn't trust it. She'd seen roaches she was sure were dead, and gone and pushed themselves up off the ground and nonchalantly walk away. As long as this strange beast had life in it, it presented a danger. She went to the hearth and picked up the iron rod that was used to poke the fire. Then, keeping her distance from the thing, she touched the creature with the end of the poker. What happened next came so fast that it caught Candy completely off guard. The creature suddenly flipped itself over and crawled up the poker with the speed of a striking snake. Before Candy had time to let go of the poker, the design beneath the bug's eyes opened up like the mouth of a crab, and a spike, about 5 inches long, emerged and jabbed Candy's hand in the cradle of flesh between her forefinger and her thumb. Blood ran out of the wound. Yelping, Candy dropped the iron poker. She put the cut to her mouth immediately, tasting the tang of her own blood, and perhaps something of the creature's metallic innards, from whence the spike had come. Meanwhile, the insect had dropped off the poker, and was finally retreating. It was wounded, she saw. 2 of its legs were set awry, and were being dragged behind it. Even so, as it retreated, it underwent an extraordinary transformation. Without missing a steady step of its speedy stride, its back opened up, 2 doors sliding out of sight. Its wings were then raised and folded and slid with perfect accuracy into the opening, and its back closed up again. At the same time, a host of other smaller changes were taking place in its anatomy. A telescopic tail appeared, almost doubling the insect's length when it reached its full measure, and a second rack of legs appeared along its abdomen. When its reconfiguration was complete, it no longer resembled a locust or a dragonfly, but a huge centipede. Even its color seemed to have changed subtly. Its bright greens bled of their intensity, so that now it was a sickly, mottled yellow. It no longer tried to record Candy or her surroundings. All it wanted now was to be away as fast as possible, so as to avoid another attempt on its artificial life. Candy made no further attempt to stop it from escaping. It wasn't worth the risk. The creature was now about 2 feet from freedom, and then in walked Izarith. She failed to notice the thing scuttling beneath her feet. Good mother that she was, her eyes went first to her frightened daughter. "Watch out!" Candy yelled. Too late. Izarith had trodden on the tail of the creature, which cracked like the shell of a lobster. Izarith looked down. The food she'd brought in with her fell from her hands. An expression of the most intense disgust came to her face. She raised her foot to stomp on it again. "Get it, Muma," Mesa said, silent tears running down her cheeks. "Be careful," Candy warned her, still trying to stop the blood flowing from her hand. "It fights back." Izarith didn't seem to care. Her house had been invaded and her child had been terrorized. She was furious. She stamped on it twice, bringing her heel down hard. The creature was fast, however. It tried to rush away between Izarith's legs, but she took a step back to stop it, and realizing the way was barred, the creature turned, its bug eyes scanning the wall to the right of the door. Picking up the poker that Candy had dropped, Izarith pursued the creature to the corner of the room. But again the insect showed a remarkable turn of speed. It ran toward the wall and leaped, driving its feet into the plaster. Then it made a zigzag ascent, evading each and every blow Izarith attempted to deliver. In a matter of seconds, it was out of her reach and heading across the ceiling to a place where plaster had fallen away, exposing a sizable hole. It disappeared through it and was gone. "Hush," Israth said to Nazare, who'd begun to cry out loud. The child stopped crying almost instantly. Candy listened. She could still hear the creature's feet as it scuttled away. Eventually they grew so soft, Candy wasn't sure whether she was still hearing them or imagining it. Then they were finally gone. Candy looked down at her hand. It was still bleeding. Not enough, not a lot, but enough to make Candy feel faintly sick. It was not just the blood that sickened her. Candy had a strong stomach. It was much more to do with the memory of the creature's scrutiny, the horrid intelligence of its stare. "Do you know where that thing came from?" she asked Israth. Israth picked up what looked like the remains of a child's shirt and tossed it over to Candy. "Here," she said. "It will stop the blood." "Well, do you?" "No," Israth replied, not looking at Candy. "There are things like that all over, but never before in my home." "But it wasn't real, Israth. It was a machine of some kind." Israth shrugged, as though the matter of it being real or not was completely irrelevant. Candy tore the old garment she'd been given into 2 strips and bound it around her hand. It slowly stopped throbbing. As she tied off the knot, Israth, who had been silently working to calm and then feed her children, said, "I think you should go." She still wasn't looking at Candy. Plainly the fact that she was ushering the girl, who'd been so generous to her, out of her house was an embarrassment, but her primary concern was for her children's safety. "Will others like that thing come to replace it?" "I don't know," Israth said, finally glancing up at Candy. The blood had gone out of her face. Though she dealt with the insect efficiently enough, she was obviously deeply afraid. There were tears in her eyes, but she was fighting them bravely. "I'm sorry," she said. "I just think it's better if you go." Candy nodded. "Of course," she said. "I understand. I hope things go well for you and your family." "Thank you," Israth said. "I hope things go well for you, too. But be careful. This is a dangerous time." "So I begin to see," Candy said. Israth nodded. Then she returned to the business of feeding her children, leaving Candy to make her own way out. And that was chapter 15. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good day.